One of the easiest ways I found of drawing the human figure is starting with the torso first. When you start with just the head, it's harder to base everything off of because it's just one thing extruding off of the torso. Whereas when you start with the torso, it affects the legs, arms, and head. It also affects the position of all three. For example, if I were to start the torso on this pose, I can quickly figure out where everything is going, and having this initial base to me is a lot more information than starting with the head. I can, for example, throw in the leg very quickly on both sides. Throw in the rib cage. Throw in the head. Traps into the arms. I am also able to more easily exaggerate the pose because I'm starting with the torso. Whereas if I'm starting with the head, I have to plan ahead a lot more, no pun intended, and very carefully figure out everything as I'm going. So the torso can only be in so many different positions because the head is already established. Whereas if your focus is on drawing from imagination, drawing with the torso, inherently drawing more initial information, lets you put down more stuff faster so you can react to it faster. And again, I guess once you have this initial base, the whole process is pretty much the same. But the torso, it allows for immediate depiction of what you're looking at faster, and it lets you iterate a little bit more with the poses. If I were to put this away and try and draw the same pose from imagination, just using kind of the torso method, head, I remember arm over here, rib cage, hips. And a lot of this stuff is approximations. It's not like I'm drawing the correct shape exactly the first time. I'm kind of drawing over things that might not have worked the first time. And using this method really lets me dial in on my opinions on what I think things should look like. So I remember this leg kind of going like this. This one kind of going more like that. Arm off to the side. Torso, pec. Rib cage. Abs. And this whole strategy of drawing is very much based off a comic artist's way of drawing people. If you watch artists like Jim Lee or Ryan Benjamin or whoever else draw people, they will start with something like the torso because it is all-encompassing to the figure. It lets you pose things in a storyboard or a frame a lot faster. It also lets you depict the style of character that you're drawing. Drawing something like this in a comic book, where if you draw something like this, it's a more modest, maybe more masculine figure. And those two versions of shape design, that is the thing that lets you iterate and lets you tell a story a lot faster on the fly when you're doing something like thumbnails for a comic book or an illustration or a storyboard or whatever. And starting with the head is a more academic, fine art approach that might not work for every application that you're trying to do. I've mentioned this in other videos, but this particular form of drawing as well, starting with the torso first, it lets you do a couple things. You can treat this as two different bases for two different poses. If we wanted to treat it as more of a front-on pose, we totally could. Rib cage, pecs, abs, whatever, traps, arms. And that particular thing can also be kind of overlaid as well to do something maybe a little, like maybe it could be a back pose. If I take a very similar shape to what I had over there, treating this as the spine instead, using some rhythms to kind of connect all the shapes together. Leg, leg, traps. I made this a bit large. The head would go off the page, but it's okay. Traps. And again, this form of drawing, starting with the torso first, lets me experiment a little bit more with the anatomy. It lets me be a little bit more flowy with my lines, a little bit more energetic. And I think that that strategy of drawing that way, in general, serves to make your drawings have a little bit more storytelling in them. If you look at artists like, I don't know, Frank Frazetta, or mostly comic artists, comic illustrators and stuff, they will, in general, start with something like the torso first. And this is not exactly perfect, but it's good enough to really get started on, a more refined and figured out pose. If you guys are interested, as an assignment, I would recommend just going onto a page and just drawing a bunch of these, going through and, draw a bunch of like box-y type shapes and creating figures from that. I'm doing this completely from my head. I can already see where I kind of want to go with these things as I'm doing it. But, it's, I think, a very good exercise to get into, in general, just good figure invention. When you look at comic artists draw versus academic artists, you'll see that they draw in kind of different ways. A comic artist will be a lot more swoopy with his lines, or, he'll go down and do the tripod grip a lot more. The actual surface they're drawing on is actually a lot smaller as well. So you have a lot less room to kind of play around and experiment. Whereas an academic artist can kind of take their time a little bit more. They have all the information in front of them, and they can depict a thing one-to-one because they have essentially a cheat sheet to check. Okay, is this arm here? Is this, is this head in the correct spot relative to the leg, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas a comic artist kind of has to react and figure out things intuitively on the spot. Head there. Sternocleidomastoid, down into the pit of the neck, down into the pec, rib cage, trap. And I'm drawing something kind of akin to what the Riley method is like, which is, very swoopy lines, kind of basing everything that I'm drawing off the rhythms of the body. Maybe I can kind of see this leg potentially coming up. Crotch area, Another leg. I'm going to include a little download on Gumroad after this video with a PSD of bases that you guys can draw from to be able to build something from a pre-established envelope torso. So you guys can kind of experiment with my shape and kind of figure out how to invent things from a base that's already established. And the beautiful thing about this is you're kind of reacting to shapes. Like when you set the torso down, there's only a certain amount of positions the arm can be in that particular torso position. And once you establish, okay, this is facing forward, this is going that, it's very impossible for the arm to go way back in space or be in some weird spot. And your only job at that point is to have a somewhat intuitive understanding of how an arm attaches to a body, or how a leg attaches to a body, or how the head attaches to the body. And using that, like keeping it as simple as possible strategy of focusing on the torso lets you really focus on getting the biggest things established first. If that's the case, it's very easy to just go one step at a time and kind of just figure things out. I'll do one more. I'll change this up a little bit. Add some perspective to it, some overlapping traps, rib cage, crotch area, legs, arms, when it comes to drawing in general, all of figuring out how to draw something complex like the human figure is simplifying it down to its base fundamental shapes and finding something that works exactly for you. You know, I studied a lot of the start with the head first or do some sight size stuff and measure everything out, but I found it just doesn't work exactly for my personality. And the goal of me doing this is to just jump into the things I like doing as fast as possible, which is posing and telling a story. Your particular strategies for doing all this stuff might differ from mine, but again, the goal is to figure out what works best for you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you haven't yet already, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and share with your friends. You know, it really helps. And if you're interested in learning from me, I have a mentorship on Patreon where I charge $150 a month for 2 meetings, 2 calls a month. We talk about your art, I do drawovers, critiques, and I think more importantly, we can talk about your goals and how art might fit into a larger career or a larger project. Thanks, and if you want to check it out, it's there. Also, keep an eye out on Proko.com. I'm going to have some courses up there at some point. So yeah, thanks, and have a good one.